One night, the man who married my daughter stood in my kitchen and told me I should start letting go of things in my own house. If you've lived through something like this, share your story in the comments. The afternoon I returned from the hospital, the first thing I noticed was that my suitcase wasn't in the hallway. A few steps farther, and the reason appeared in a single blunt sight: every piece of my clothing, my toolbox, even the stack of folders I kept near my desk, had been tossed into the garage. The door to my bedroom carried a new lock, and a voice I didn't recognize drifted from my own bed. Eric stepped out, wiping his hands on his jeans, as if he'd been fixing something. His father lingered behind him, settling into the space like he owned it. "Your dad's staying here for a bit," Eric said. My daughter, standing a few feet away, looked down. "Why is all my stuff in the garage?" The question left my mouth before I could soften it. Eric nudged a box with his shoe. The thought sat heavy, pressing into the kind of worry that builds even when a person tries to hold steady. Pulling into the driveway, a figure stepped out of a rideshare on the curb. Eric's father. This time he carried a large duffel bag that looked packed for a week, not a night. His stride showed no hesitation as he walked straight into the house. The door had barely closed when Eric appeared in the entryway. "Good timing," he said. "We're sorting through some older paperwork. Dad's helping. You should rest. Let us handle the mess." "Paperwork?" I asked. "Old stuff. You won't even miss it. Just relax." Relax. The word felt misplaced. Still arguing right then served no purpose. Moving past him toward the garage, his father's duffel caught my attention again. Bigger than the one he carried the night before, stuffed tight enough that the zipper strained. Self-doubt crept in as I settled near the workbench. Was I reading too much into all this? Maybe the fall and the days in the hospital had clouded my judgment. Maybe Eric truly believed he was helping. Yet every time that thought surfaced, something else contradicted it. The keys, the envelopes, the rearranged house, the sudden presence of his father. Mounting the camera didn't take long. The unit fit neatly on a shelf aimed loosely toward the safe and the rear portion of the garage. No perfect angle, but good enough to catch movement. Later that afternoon, footsteps carried through the hall. Eric and his father entered the garage, flipping through folders and talking as if they owned the space. "We need to find the older records," Eric said. "Once we get everything in order, he won't have anything left to worry about." His father chuckled. "Let's start here." They pulled drawers open, moved crates, and talked over each other. When I stepped into view, Eric raised a hand. "Go lie down," he said. "We'll clear this out. You shouldn't strain yourself." "It's my garage," I replied. He smiled as though that settled nothing. "We're just helping." Their presence pushed me back toward the house. The bedroom, my daughter's old room now used as storage, felt like the only place left where no one hovered over me. Evening settled by the time I returned to the garage to check the camera feed. A portable monitor displayed the recording. Forwarding through the footage, a familiar sight appeared: Eric bending over the safe, trying different keys from his pocket. None matched. He tried again. His father held a small flashlight, gesturing impatiently. Another clip followed my daughter standing in the doorway, arms crossed. She didn't warn him or tell him to stop. She simply watched. The video didn't show her approving. It didn't show her protesting either. That quiet stare hurt more than any words would have. Rewinding the footage, the pieces lined up on their own. Eric testing the lock, his father suggesting tools, my daughter standing guard without saying a single thing. Morning came without rest. The garage looked worse than the day before. Crates, shifted papers, scattered a pry bar leaning against the wall, as if someone had set it down mid-job. Stepping toward the safe, shallow dents around the lock caught my eye. Fresh ones sharper than the old ware I'd grown familiar with. Eric appeared behind me, rubbing sleep from his face. "Those marks, they've been there forever," he said. His glance skipped over the pry bar. "You shouldn't be bending over like that. Doctor said to take it easy." "These weren't here yesterday," I answered. He forced a laugh. "You're still recovering. Things look different when you're tired. Let us handle the heavy lifting." Another shift of blame. Another dismissal. His confidence came too easily, as though he'd rehearsed every line. Leaving the garage felt necessary. A meal sounded easier than conversation, so the truck headed toward Tempe. The small diner near the clinic wasn't busy, which worked in my favor. A booth offered space to breathe and think. Marissa walked in not long after carrying her lunch in a brown paper bag. She paused when she saw me. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. "Go ahead." Once she settled, the concern on her face sharpened. "Your hand is trembling. Did something happen at home?" "Just a long morning," I replied. "David, that's not what I asked." She leaned forward slightly. "Are you sure your house is safe for you right now?" Her tone stayed steady, almost clinical, but the question dug under everything I'd been trying to hold together. A shake of the head didn't come yet. She seemed to read enough in my silence. "People push boundaries when they think someone won't push back," she said. "Happens more than you think." The words landed like a weight dropped on a table. No drama, no lecture, just truth. And it nudged something I'd been avoiding all week. No one would step in for me if I didn't act. When the meal was done, the drive home passed in a blur. The garage door rose slowly, revealing the same chaotic scene I'd left. The camera monitor mounted on the shelf blinked, waiting. Pulling up the recording from the previous night took only seconds. The footage erased any trace of doubt. Eric and his father returned around midnight with a set of hand tools. A flathead screwdriver, a drill, something that looked like a wedge. They spoke in low tones. "We have to get the code before he moves his accounts," Eric said. His father examined the lock. "This one's tougher. Try the other keys." They continued testing, discarding tools, trying again. The determination in their movements made my throat tighten. Scrolling deeper into the feed, another moment froze me. My daughter stepped into the doorway of the garage, watching them work. No indignation. No panic. Only a tired acceptance, like she'd surrendered to the plan long before I suspected anything. The key ring in my pocket suddenly made sense. Those keys weren't random. They belonged to the old safe I'd kept in my former bedroom. They intended to try every lock in the house until something opened. Closing the monitor didn't calm anything. A rustling from the hallway signaled their return. Eric's voice carried first. "Dad's going to stay with us longer than we thought," he said. "We're handling some paperwork, and it's easier if he's here." "What paperwork?" I asked. He crossed his arms. "Utilities, ownership records. Those need updating. It makes sense for us to manage the accounts since we're the ones doing the work." "You're changing the house accounts, not changing smoothing things out. You're recovering. Let us take care of the parts that stress you." He spoke as though the house had already shifted into his name, as though I'd paused somewhere along the way, and he'd simply stepped into the space I left. His father wandered in behind him, holding a stack of folders pulled from my old filing cabinet. Neither bothered to ask before taking them. The words to challenge him formed slowly, too slow to matter in that moment. Instead, I stepped past them and reached the hallway closet. A metal box sat on the top shelf where I'd kept important papers for years. Pulling it down, the lid opened with a soft resistance. The folder containing my bank records had shifted pages tucked in the wrong direction, a few creased at the corner, as if handled roughly by someone who didn't care whether I noticed. One page bore a faint smudge along the edge oil from a hand that wasn't mine. Several bank documents lay spread across the table, not in the order I kept them. A few sheets had creases along the corner, as though someone thumbed through them in a hurry. One statement sat upside down. Another bore a faint wrinkle near the account summary, the kind made when a finger presses too hard while flipping pages. None of it looked accidental. A hollow feeling started forming once the pattern became clear. My daughter had access to this drawer. She could have stopped Eric if she wanted to. That thought tightened around my chest more than the discovery itself. Eric entered the kitchen, holding a stack of folders under his arm. "Good you're up," he said. "We need your signature on something. A temporary authorization so we can manage the bills while you recover." He slid a form across the table. "It lets us handle utilities and a few other things. It's basic housekeeping." My hand stayed still. "No." A smile twitched across his face, the kind meant to look patient but carried an edge. "It's just paperwork. You shouldn't stress over this. The doctor told you to slow down." "I'm not signing anything." His posture straightened. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. We're trying to help. You don't want the house falling behind on payments, do you?" "The house isn't behind." Eric let out a sharp breath. "You don't know that. You've been in the hospital. You should let people step in." My daughter appeared near the sink, drying a plate, avoiding our eyes. The refusal hung between us thick enough to force her out of the room. Eric watched her leave, then leaned forward and lowered his voice. "If you don't sign it, we'll have to do things the slow way." The slow way. I didn't ask what that meant. Stepping out to the yard offered distance but not enough quiet. The back gate rattled. Eric's father bent over the trunk of his car, rummaging through a toolbox. Metal clanked tools shifted. A long, narrow object, something like a pry tool, caught the light before he tucked it deeper into the trunk. He shut the lid when he noticed me watching. "We needed room. You just got home. You should rest and let us handle things." "Handle what?" The words carried more confusion than anger. My daughter raised her chin but kept her eyes somewhere near the floor. "Just for a few days, Dad, please." Eric folded his arms. "Yeah, let it settle. We'll sort out the house. You've had a rough week." The hallway felt thinner by the second. Eric kept talking about space and temporary arrangements, dodging anything close to a real explanation. His father drifted back toward the bedroom, humming under his breath, as if he'd found a comfortable hotel room. "What gave you the idea you could move my things?" The question came out low. Eric shrugged. "You weren't here. Stuff needed organizing. It's fine." My daughter finally spoke again, barely above a murmur. "We didn't want to bother you at the hospital." No one met my eyes. Not her. Not Eric. A dozen replies formed, but none of them felt worth the cost. "Just organizing," he muttered, then walked back toward the house without another word. Not long after my phone buzzed, Marissa's name appeared on the screen. "You doing all right?" she asked. "You left the diner looking worn out. I wanted to check." The question loosened something I'd been holding tight. "I think they're taking my house," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. She didn't gasp or rush to comfort. "Then you need to stop giving them room. People push until someone tells them to stop." A pause followed. "Be careful, David. Lines once crossed don't get magically restored." Her words didn't add panic. They clarified what had been building. The problem wasn't just Eric. My silence had given him space to grow bold enough to try. The call ended, and my legs carried me back toward the house before I fully decided what to do. A plan wasn't shaped yet, but action finally felt necessary. Another camera went up that evening in the living room, angled toward the hallway and garage door. The installation took a few minutes, enough for my heartbeat to slow and reasoning to return. The sun dipped behind the yard wall, leaving the house in a dull haze. A heaviness settled across each room, not from the hour, but from the pressure of what waited beneath the surface. Eric and his father lingered in the kitchen, murmuring. Cabinet doors opened and shut. The refrigerator buzzed, masking fragments of their conversation. A lamp switched off as I stood near the living room doorway. The house dimmed. My back pressed to the wall, while I listened for anything that might signal their next move. The new camera blinked, recording in short intervals. A scrape echoed from the garage. The automatic door rumbled. Eric's voice carried through the gap. "Tonight we finish it," he said. His father murmured something back, a low agreement followed by the shuffle of tools. The garage monitor flickered to life the moment I tapped it on. Eric and his father entered the frame carrying a fresh kit of tools, crowbars, drill bits, a small metal punch. They moved with a sense of purpose, speaking low but fast. The safe sat in front of them like a puzzle they planned to conquer before dawn. Eric bent down first. "Try the wedge," he said. His father handed it over without hesitation. Metal scraped as the tool pressed along the lock. They shifted positions, swapped tools, argued briefly about leverage. The determination in their movements revealed one thing clearly: they weren't experimenting anymore. They knew exactly what they wanted. Then Eric paused and reached into his jacket. A white envelope emerged, creased along the edges as if handled many times. He opened it and slid out a form. "She signed it," he said, tapping the signature line. "This gives me the authority to handle his financial matters. Once we get the code, everything falls into place." My daughter's handwriting covered the bottom of the page. Not a forged scrawl, her actual signature. The blow hit deeper than any of Eric's schemes. She hadn't been pressured that morning or tricked in a moment of panic. She had signed something like this before I even knew my home was shifting beneath my feet. Eric's father let out a pleased grunt. "Good. With this, we can move the stocks into the new account before he changes direction." Eric nodded. "He's getting suspicious. We need the transfers done before he figures out anything." Their plan laid itself bare. They didn't just want access, they wanted control before I could stop them. Scrolling the playback backward, a new detail surfaced. Eric's father held a small folded note, my handwriting or something close enough to mimic it. A list of partial passwords I kept years ago. Lines crossed out, tiny corrections next to each number. He smoothed it out and whispered, "If this matches what he used before, we're close." Another few minutes into the feed, Eric leaned against the safe, frustrated. "I looked through her phone again," he muttered. "She keeps his email saved. There's enough there to guess the last digits." So he had been searching my daughter's phone without her knowledge, or maybe she allowed it. Hard to know which possibility cut deeper. The pieces aligned too cleanly now. Time to gather what evidence I had. The recording was copied onto a flash drive. Another copy went to my phone. A few printed stills captured Eric holding the envelope with her signature, and his father clutching the password list. The clock neared midnight when I grabbed my jacket and drove toward the Mesa Police Department. The parking lot sat half empty. A patrol officer stepped out of his vehicle, startled by my approach. "You need help, sir?" he asked. "I need to file something," I said, handing him the flash drive. "It's urgent." He took one look at my expression and nodded slowly. "Come with me. We'll get this logged." The process took minutes. Questions, asked notes, typed statements, summarized. The officer assured me the evidence would be reviewed immediately. Walking back to the truck, the air felt heavier than when I'd arrived. Not colder, just charged with the strain of everything shifting at once. The drive home stretched longer than usual. The back porch light glowed faintly when I pulled into the driveway, though I hadn't left it on. Stepping toward the door, something felt off. The latch rested slightly open. Before I could push it shut, Eric stepped out, blocking the frame. His expression held none of the artificial charm he used in front of my daughter. His jaw clenched, and the friendliness he wore earlier had vanished. "What were you doing out there?" he asked. He waited, eyes narrowed. No explanation came. My hand reached for the door instead. Eric shifted his weight, but didn't grab me. He simply stared, trying to read whatever he thought he deserved to know. The gap between us lingered a moment longer, thick and sharp. The call came not long after I closed the door on Eric. A dispatcher from the Mesa Police Department spoke in a low, measured tone. "Officers are en route. Stay where you are and be prepared to let them in." There was no fear left to stir. The decision had already been made when I handed the evidence over. The yard offered a place to breathe while waiting, so I stepped out back. The garage glowed faintly. Shadows moved against the far wall as Eric and his father kept working. Metal tapped. A drill whirred. Their determination hadn't faded even with the hour creeping toward dawn. Whatever hesitation existed earlier in the week no longer lived in me. Doubt had been replaced by something steadier, an awareness that hesitation had carried a cost I couldn't afford anymore. The phone buzzed again. "This is Officer Ramirez," a voice said. "We're approaching from two sides. Do not interfere. When we signal, step back." "Understood." A gate latch clicked near the alley. Another sound came from the side yard. The officers moved with purpose, coordinating quietly, but precisely. I stayed near the patio door far enough not to obstruct anything close enough to see the outline of their approach. A flashlight swept across the yard. "Mr. Harmon, step aside," one of them ordered. I moved back. Two officers passed me, their vests rustling as they headed straight for the garage. Another pair circled to the front. Eric's voice carried through the cracked garage door. "Hold it steady. If we get through this part, the rest is simple." Then the door jerked upward. "Police, drop the tools." Eric spun around. His father froze, still gripping the handle of a metal punch. Shock flickered across both of their faces. Not fear of injury, but the recognition that their timeline had run out. One officer stepped in, gun holstered but hand ready. "Turn around and keep your hands visible." Eric's father complied. After a beat, the tool clattering to the concrete. Eric hesitated a second too long. "It's not what it looks like," he muttered. The officer repeated, sharper this time. "Hands behind your back." While they secured his wrists, a sheet of paper slid from Eric's jacket, the same authorization form with my daughter's signature. Another officer retrieved it with gloved hands. Eric's frustration boiled over. "She knew everything," he snapped. "We planned this with her. She said he wouldn't fight us." The officer halted his rant with a warning look. "Stop talking unless you want to make this worse." But Eric had already said more than he understood. My daughter appeared at the hallway entrance, hair undone, breathing hard. "What's happening?" she whispered. The officer closest to her stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions. Come with me." Her gaze darted from me to Eric, then to the officers. Panic took hold. "Eric, what did you say? What did you do?" He tried to lunge toward her, but the officers restrained him. "I did this for us," he shouted. "You told me—" "Enough," an officer snapped, pulling him back. His father remained silent, staring at the ground, shoulders sagging. My daughter backed away as the officers guided her toward the living room. She didn't look at me again. The officers moved efficiently, securing tools, photographing the safe, logging every document they found. They guided Eric and his father toward the front of the house. Metal cuffs clicked. Doors opened. The night air shifted as they were escorted outside. One officer gestured for me to stay behind while they cleared a path. I stepped back towards the lawn, allowing them room. The doctor had warned me to take it slow, and standing there still sore from the fall that sent me to Banner Desert Medical Center, arguing wasn't going to help. So the next breath came long and steady. "All right," I said, though the word tasted wrong. Eric clapped his hands once. "Good. We'll manage the rest." He walked off already distracted by something on his phone. My daughter followed him, pausing only long enough to whisper, "It's temporary. Just trust us." Trust. That hung in the air long after they disappeared down the short hallway. The garage door groaned as I pushed it open. Boxes leaned against each other in uneven stacks. A few shirts had slid onto the concrete. Not a single item had been placed with care. My bedsheets were crumpled near the lawn equipment. The rest of my life scattered without a second thought. Feet moved slowly through the clutter until they reached the metal safe tucked in the corner. Dust still covered the lid untouched. The holding room at the Mesa Police Department still carried the energy of the night before papers spread out, officers moving from one desk to another, printers humming in short bursts. A detective placed the flash drive on the table. "We need your signature here, Mr. Harmon," he said. Another form slid forward, and here confirming the recordings came from your devices. My pen moved across each line without hesitation. The camera I'd taken from the garage sat in an evidence box, tagged and sealed. Officers reviewed every item calmly, as if this type of betrayal unfolded in homes every week. My daughter remained somewhere deeper in the building, giving her own statement. She didn't ask to see me, and no officer suggested we speak. The distance made something clear, whatever connection we had before this had thinned, long before Eric arrived. When the final document was signed, the detective paused. "Do you need anything before you go?" "No," I said and meant it. The walk to the parking lot felt longer than the path in. Dawn edged across the sky. Not a new beginning, just another day starting whether I was ready or not. Weeks followed with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. Prosecutors moved quickly once they realized Eric hadn't just overstepped. He'd engineered a plan with multiple parts, each documented or recorded without him noticing. Charges stacked: unlawful entry, attempted financial exploitation, tampering with personal property fraud. His father faced lesser counts, but still enough to keep him under the court's eye. I never attended the early hearings. My presence wasn't required. Evidence spoke louder than anything I could add. One afternoon, a victim advocate called. "Do you want to request leniency?" she asked, "or ask for harsher penalties?" Neither, I answered. "Just let the record show what happened." She paused, perhaps expecting anger or grief. All she got was a man tired of explaining what should have been obvious to everyone involved. My daughter's situation unraveled more slowly. Signing the authorization hadn't been illegal by itself, but knowing what Eric intended and failing to report it forced the county to treat her as a participant, even if a reluctant one. She hired an attorney. I didn't. She left one voicemail during that period. "Dad, I didn't think it would go that far. I thought he just wanted to get things organized because you were hurt." A short silence followed. I don't know what to say. No answer came from me. Sometimes the most painful truths come not from what someone does, but from what they allow. The house no longer felt like a place I belonged even after the locks were changed back. So I leased it to a young family and moved to a small apartment near the Salt River, close enough to walk the river path in the early hours, far enough to give myself distance from everything that looked familiar. A modest consulting gig came next. Former co-workers at Salt River Project sent a few projects my way. Simple reviews, energy estimates, nothing demanding. Earning money wasn't the reason I took them. Work offered structure, something grief couldn't knock around. Meals became lighter days, more rhythmic. I learned which hours the park near my building stayed quiet, which benches stayed shaded longest. Marissa called twice to check in each time, asking if the new place suited me. I never gave long answers, but she seemed to understand that moving was less about escaping and more about deciding where I'd take my next steps. One evening, a delivery arrived, the new safe I'd ordered. Smaller than the one at the house, sturdier, less sentimental. Carrying it into the bedroom took effort, but the weight grounded me. The apartment had no clutter, so the safe stood out. Its clean metal surface reflected nothing but the plain walls around it. I set it down, turned the dial a few times, then opened the door. A folder rested on the nightstand, my updated will. No dramatic language, no long explanations, just clarity. Clearer than anything I'd written in years. The papers slid into the safe the way a chapter finds its place in someone's life, without fanfare. I closed the door with one firm motion, listened for the latch to catch, then rested my hand on the cool metal for a moment before stepping away towards the rest of the room. A hand rested on the cool surface, and something in me settled not in comfort, but in certainty. The garage didn't offer much comfort, but rearranging a few boxes created a space wide enough to stretch my legs. Lowering myself onto a folded blanket, a faint murmur drifted in from the kitchen. The door had been left slightly ajar, letting voices slip through. Eric spoke first. "We need those accounts updated. He won't argue if we get the paperwork lined up." My daughter answered him softer. "Just make sure the forms are ready. He's tired. Don't push today." The exchange hit harder than anything they'd said to my face. Terms like accounts and paperwork never came up before my fall. Hearing them now framed around my weakness cut into the last bit of trust I'd been holding on to. Rather than confront anything, the blanket was pulled closer around my shoulders. The body wanted rest even while the mind refused to settle. A follow-up appointment took me back to the clinic near Banner Desert Medical Center the next day. Walking felt steadier, but the nurse practitioner still urged caution. As I stepped into the corridor afterward, Marissa Cole passed by holding a tablet covered in notes. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You're leaving already?" "You look worn out," she said. "Just checking in," I replied. "Nothing major." Marissa rested the tablet against her hip. "You walked in here last week with more energy than you're showing now." "What happened at home?" The question caught me mid-breath. "It's been busy. Some things shifted around. I'll manage." She studied me for a moment, not prying, not offering sympathy either. "Make sure you keep control of your space. People forget boundaries fast when someone else is recovering." A simple remark, but it stayed with me long after stepping out into the parking lot. Boundaries. That word trailed me the entire ride back. The house felt different when I walked in. No greeting, no sign anyone had noticed my return. On the counter lay a stack of envelopes from a bank I didn't use, each one addressed to my daughter. Most were unopened, a few torn at the corner, like someone had peeked inside quickly. My hand hovered over them before pulling back. Those envelopes weren't meant for me, yet their presence on the center counter felt intentional. Something in my stomach tightened. Eric emerged from the hallway at that moment. "Hey, glad you're back. What's the Wi-Fi password again, the router reset or something?" "It's written in my desk drawer," I said. He grinned. "Perfect. And while you're at it, you might want to dig out your pension documents. There's something we need to verify. Just routine stuff." "Routine for whom?" "For all of us," he replied. "Look, the house needs a clear structure. Bills, property, everything. Trust me, it'll run smoother." There it was. His tone had shifted since the day before. Less suggestion, more expectation. My daughter stepped out behind him holding a mug. Her expression flickered when she noticed me looking at the envelopes. "Dad, those are nothing important. I'm dealing with a few things." she said. You're dealing with a bank I've never heard you mention, I answered. The mug trembled slightly in her hand. Eric placed his arm around her shoulders. It's all connected, he said. Just housekeeping. Housekeeping. As if my life were a storage closet he planned to rearrange. Retreating to the garage seemed easier than staying under that roof for another argument. Boxes shifted again as I tried to clear the corner. A stack of old linens toppled over, revealing a small metal object on the floor. Bending down, a keyring came into view, 3 keys attached, none of them matching anything I recognized. A quick glance toward the door showed no movement. The keys were worn, one of them bent along the edge. They hadn't been dropped long ago. The metal still carried warmth from someone's pocket. Eric's coat had been hanging near the entry earlier, and something had slipped when he walked past. Turning the unfamiliar keys in my hand, possibilities surfaced one after another, none of them comforting. A safe A cabinet, a locked drawer, or something brought in without my knowledge. The garage felt narrower with each thought. My breaths grew shallow, not from fear, but from a pressure that didn't have a name yet. The safe in the corner remained untouched, in the same spot, dust still clinging to its surface. That dust told one story. The keys in my hand hinted at another. The sound of footsteps crossed the kitchen floor. A door shut. Then silence again. Unnatural, stretched thin. The keys slipped into my pocket while I moved a crate to cover the blanket. A plan wasn't forming yet. Only a sense that whatever those keys opened, it wasn't meant for me to see. The next morning took me to a hardware store off Southern Avenue. The keyring stayed in my palm, the entire drive, the metal edges tapping lightly as the truck bounced over a rough patch of road. Once inside, a clerk wearing a faded SRP cap glanced at the keys and let out a short breath. "These aren't for doors," he said. "They look like they belong to old safes or filing units, not something people use much unless they're trying to open locked storage." The remark landed harder than he probably meant it to. My wallet came out without hesitation. A small security camera and mounting kit went onto the counter. "Looking to keep an eye on something?" he asked. "Something like that," I answered. He gave a slow nod, the kind that suggested he had plenty of guesses but no interest in hearing details. Driving home, the idea of Eric targeting my safe wasn't speculation anymore.